right, friends, I have David Koll with me. David, what a pleasure it is to welcome you to the Pursuing Uncomfortable podcast.
Thanks, Melissa. It is truly my privilege to share this time with you.
David, if there's anyone I have the utmost respect for, it is you. Your journey, where you've been, the vulnerability by which you share it, and the willingness to be critically honest of yourself is truly profound. So as we get into this interview and folks will see that for themselves, I just wanted to acknowledge that up front. So David, your book, Letters to William, The Journey of Healing Through the Pain of Estrangement. And if you're listening to this podcast, you might want to jump over to YouTube and get a glimpse of this. He's got a book. I'm holding it up here, and there are several little bookmarks in it, questions I want to ask and stories to highlight. So enough from me. David, your journey, the thing that struck me first in the beginning of this book was your brutal honesty. You were in a situation that wasn't ideal.
Very, very true. And I want to say thank you to you, Melissa, because your setup here is so helpful to me. Because when we first talked online about the privilege of joining your podcast, I always want to explain that I'm an individual who has felt so called and so pulled, and I was so against this process inside until I kept listening and I kept praying and kept trying to discern. And as I got to this point, I realized looking back that all of my feelings of being alone and the situation I was in with a very, very difficult marriage, with very, very real compounding events. Mm-hmm. I realized that the more I felt alone, the more I felt shame, the more I realized that I started to believe, am I the only one? And after I started exposing this process to people, which was very, very well below the radar, I started realizing, Melissa, that there are so many people struggling with this. And whether it's in a family estrangement or a different relationship estrangement, or even a relationship of self and faith, you can become estranged. And I believe the more I found this, the more I realized I had to be authentic. I had to be pure in what I was going to show, because at the core of this book is a book for my grandson. Mm-hmm. And then as I wrote and started to realize afterwards, the letters became an opportunity. And maybe this pain that I was going through and the journey of self-discovery I was on, maybe it wasn't just for me. Maybe there's another prayer that needs to land. And if that one prayer can find a hardened heart or a softened end state, then I knew then it was worth it. And it's a constancy of curiosity in this process. And it's been one that I'm sure as we have a discussion here, we can ferret out a few and unpack a little bit. But it's been a wild journey.
Well, and we learn from the first page of the introduction that your oldest daughter is having a baby, and it's a child that you'll never see. And the book unfolds with working through all of those feelings and that process, and we get a glimpse into your marriage and the children that you had, and how all of these things, as in your words, none of this happens in a zero-sum situation, that there are so many factors and so many levels and layers to all of these stories. And it really struck me right here in my heart when I was reading the story about your marriage day and your reflections on that now. Can you tell us a little bit about that for those that haven't read the book yet?
Sure. And my ex-wife and I, my wife at the time, as I started to write to my grandson about this, and you captured it very well, is everyone wants a simple answer. Everyone wants a simple one-line solution. Oh, mom and dad are getting divorced. Here's your answer. Or why do you have a difficult relationship with your parent? Oh, here's your answer, and it's a sentence. But what all of us, and it's me included, realize that there's so much nuance, and you said it perfectly, the layers. And so when I think back to the beginning, I knew I had to share with my grandson and others that if I could capture that essence, it would also unravel others who have been forced into a narrative that isn't real. It's a narrative others tell about a reality that they have very little knowledge about. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to capture that because when we first got married, my oldest daughter it was one of those wonderful situations to where my wife, prior to marriage, got pregnant. And me being that guilty Catholic, I said, okay, we're getting married. And I write about that in the book after I think about that, what a horrible proposal. I never thought about it prior. I just thought that was my duty. That was my responsibility. And as I thought about the impacts to the relationship, I even write, I'm sure my ex-wife Lisa at the time probably had a thought, well, when she was a small child, saying, when I get married, the proposal's going to be this, and it's going to be this knight in shining armor, not some dingbat in a driveway in Marshalltown, Iowa at 9 o'clock at night. And so it really set the tone for where we were going, but we were in such a difficult place, and I describe it in the book about how so many marriages start with hopes and dreams and excitement and prayerful aspiration. Ours really started from that first step of, how are we going to do this? Why are we doing this? How can we do this? And both of us were dealing with demons at the time that really made it so difficult. And I wanted to capture that because when you can see where you've been and you can see the beginning, you get a chance to see the journey or lack of one. And that's the hard part, is we see everyone from where the point of time is today, but we don't see where they've been along the way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's like looking at an iceberg and you can see the bit above the water, but you don't see the tremendous amount underneath it.
Oh, for sure.
So you had this beginning, and then the birth of your children were all very difficult, very dramatic, and I want to say traumatic for all involved, for you, for your wife, for the children that were being born. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've always thought, or at least I've always thought, and I think this is somewhat hilarious, whenever we get into a neighborhood, and I travel a lot, and we've been relocated a lot, as you read in the book, with my business jobs that I've had, we're the one family that always seems to be that one that has the drama. No one can go and say, oh, our birth was great, everything was wonderful, and, oh, the baby's beautiful and healthy. Oh, thank goodness, and away you go. We always laugh. There's always a story. There's always a nuance or something there. And what I started also to realize, Melissa, is so few people know their birth story. We all will hear our end of our last day story because there will be a eulogy. Dave was this, and I'll get 4 minutes of a pastoral sort of reality and comic show, and we'll be done, right? Dave was a funny guy, or Dave was very alone, or whatever the case is. But I have found it fascinating that our birth stories can be just as remarkable. And it just so happens my 3 biological children all had significant story from our oldest, Kate, who the book is primarily about. That was our first birth, and we had zero idea how it was supposed to go, and we were in such a significant problem in our marriage, even at 6 months in, that we had no idea how to put those two things together. And I talk about her first day, and I wanted to capture it in the book as something intriguing. So I made it the Great Escape, and how Caitlin tried to escape, our oldest tried to escape without anyone knowing it. And what she was doing was foreshadowing the birth of each subsequent child. Because due to a low amniotic fluid situation with mom, we didn't realize that this was a pattern in her birth process going back 35 years ago now, that uh, the amniotic fluid is there to protect the baby. And what happened was the cord would get wrapped around our children. All three of our children had this happen. And we were so unaware medically, but each birth had significant trauma associated with it. So Caitlin was born, and I created it, The Great Escape. And then our second daughter, Allison, when she was 6 months in utero, the cord got wrapped around her neck and she stroked inside. And so at the 6 month mark, she had a grade 4 hemorrhage, which created significant neurological, physical, motor skill damage, which she has cerebral palsy and epilepsy. And it created a
I
whole
want
new
to
model.
pause here,
Yes.
if we could, if you
Sure.
don't mind. Um, the way you write about it in your book, that moment when you woke up and your wife is crying hysterically and tells you that the unborn child has a problem in her head, and your response of, oh, yeah, like you're going to know that. I love that that very quickly you trusted this woman's intuition, and it was confirmed later, but there was something transcendent working among the three of you in that moment.
And it was so important, and it gives me kind of the goosebumps even thinking about it again. This is that morning. We were in such a heavy stress environment. We were relocating to another job. We were in temporary housing. We were arguing and difficult. It was just one of those really bad adult moments, right? And then my ex-wife Lisa wakes up and she's crying and she says, "There's something wrong with the baby," and she knew. And I don't know why it was that moment, but I listened. And I said, "Come on, honey, that can't be it. It won't be it, isn't it? It's not it." And then she said, "I know. We have to go." And I said, "Okay, let's go." And we went in, and it just so happens we went to St. Paul Children's Hospital in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is by far one of the best in the region. It was all working out. And we went in and they were giving us the poo-poo, right? "Don't worry, it's nothing. Don't worry, it's nothing. It's Braxton Hicks, nothing, no big things to worry about." And my wife at the time was saying, "Check the head, check that baby's head. I know there's a problem." And the technician was doing, oh, it's nothing, it's nothing. And I'll never forget, she stopped mid-sentence. She stopped mid-sentence and she was putting the ultrasound wand at different angles and more angles, and her face contorted. And my wife at the time was saying, "There's something wrong. You need to be sure there's something wrong." And the technician said, "I'm going to come right back." Literally dropped her wand and left. And 2 minutes later, we had 4 or 5 white coats in the room. My wife's hysterical, and they're all looking at the image, and they said nothing. Turned around, walked back out. Next, I have 7 doctors in, because we're at a teaching hospital. St. Paul is a teaching hospital. And so they all came back in, and they said, "We have some very, very bad news. Your child has had an internal hemorrhage. It's a stroke. Your child will probably not make it for the next 30 days. And they walked us through all of the significant trauma that our daughter Allison was going to be going through. And that was one of those moments where you realize, wow, now everything's going to change. No matter how this goes, it's even going to be further opportunity for us to figure it out or be buried by it. And we went through all of the process, and Allison was born full term, at 9 months, her due date, and she was born, as I say in the book, and they were almost disappointed because our last diagnosis was Allison would be born, her head would swell, and that she would probably die in our arms. And to have her still with us and doing everything she's doing, and obviously there's some other stories with Allison in the book, but it's so miraculous of how she has endured, how all of those around her have endured, and that blessing that we received by her.
One of my favorite moments in the book was Allison and the bicycle.
Yes. Yes. I like to say that I am the gift to how to train how to ride a bicycle to my children, even to the neighborhood. With Allison's cerebral palsy, Allison, after a couple of years, we realized that Allison's motor skills and the damage due from the hemorrhage or the stroke has caused cerebral palsy. I wanted as much as I could to create an environment for Allison that would be as normal as we could possibly make it. And Allison has this gift of drive. We're going to do it. We're going to get it. And I want to. And I said, okay, Allison, do you want to ride a bike? And I said, here's how we're going to train. So we put her on the bike. And with Allison, she couldn't hold the handlebar very well with her left hand due to the cerebral palsy. And she could get some movement out of her left foot. So we knew we'd have to overcompensate with her right side. And so we practiced first going down grassy knolls to where she would crash and fall, but it wouldn't hurt and it wouldn't cause too much damage. And so we finally got to the point where we said, okay, Allison, we're ready to go. Are you ready? She goes, yes, Dad. And we went out and we got on a flat surface around a lake, then one of those little neighborhood ponds. And we said, okay, Allison, I'm going to push. You ready? She was so fired up. She goes, I'm ready, Dad. And I gave her a shove, Melissa, and she was going. And she was going, and I was crying hysterically and celebrating the miracle that she can ride her bike. And then she started picking up speed. And then she started really picking up speed. I could see that she was struggling to keep up with the pedals. And then I started like, oh, slow down, slow down. And I started chasing her. And I noticed there was one of these big bricks in the middle of the path that are kind of flow the traffic from one side to the next at the corners. And Allison started heading right for that brick. And I took off running. I said, Allison, slow down. And then she started to kind of veer to the right. And I think, okay, she's fine. And I stopped. And then I realized it was only a subtle veer. And if she missed the brick, she was going into the busy street down below. And now I'm really running. And she hit that brick dead center. Over the top, rolled down the hill. I'm running. I can't see her anymore. She comes up to the top, completely laughing and grinning. And she says, Dad, I have no idea how to stop that thing. And I said, the next time we work on braking, Allison, that's my fault.
Note to self, when learning how to ride a bike,
Right.
it's important to learn how to stop.
Yes.
But I love that she just jumped up and came and met you and like, hey, we should learn how to stop.
Yeah, Dad. And that's always been Allison, and it's always been her personality. And then what the reader will see, and you've seen in the book, is I found that after end of these stories, they almost naturally became lessons or opportunities to share back to my grandson, saying, hey, in life, you're going to have to just get on the bike, and you're going to have to pedal, and you're going to have to move. And we think we can prepare for everything, and we ended up paralyzing our steps instead of being encouraged to be courageous to take them. And so I found a lot of, if not every one of the letters I wrote, started to take on a very purposeful. The story would start, and the lesson would kind of come out in the writing. And as everyone will know who reads this, I'm not Shakespeare, but I think the opportunity to let your pen flow, and I call it letting the ink bleed, because too many people came up to me after writing the book or since writing the book, and they're like, how did you write this? And I said, no, that's the wrong answer. Allowing it is your first step. And if you just let your pen kind of make those scribbles, it's amazing how the pen will find its way. And you don't have to edit truth. You don't have to edit authentic. You just allow it. And it really becomes interesting.
That's one of the more beautiful things about your book. In these stories, you didn't gloss over or you can tell that you didn't go back and make the emotions pretty. They're gritty, they're authentic, and they're so real and so relatable. My life experience is so much different than yours, but when I read these stories, I connect through that authenticity and through that genuine expression. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you for the thank you. And it's one of those, I knew writing it that, and when I first started writing, it was going to be I just thought it was going to be a cathartic sort of one day release. Oh, my daughter will bend. We'll get back to what we normally do. We start and we stop. We'll have these breaks and it'll be just one day. And after I kept writing and kept writing, the weeks became months and months became a lot of months. And the writing almost took its own, but I knew that I couldn't, and I say this in the book several places, I couldn't let this feeling consume me. I was afraid of it. I was really afraid of it because if I did, if I let it eat, it would consume, but I had to be aware of it. And I had to write it. And I liken it, whether it's the Holy Spirit or I was feeling this compelling to let it find its relevancy on paper and let it get out of me internally and let it find residence externally. And so it really allowed me to not be editing on the fly. It just said, okay, this is how I feel. And several of the letters I start off with, I'm in a horrible mood today. I hate today. It's 2 days from Father's Day. It's the worst day of my year. And those are my...
Yeah, that letter. That was...
Yeah, because I think there's a place for pain, right? And the more that pain becomes purposeful, or the sacrifice, or the struggle, the friction, I see this in our own, and we have 7 between us now. So my 4 non-biological children and my 3 originals. I call them the hobos in the book. But
I love that.
Yeah, anytime you can own your couch and own the house within it and still be on mine, you're a hobo. In
a loving sense.
In a loving sense.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. My wife's eyes explode when the kids come to the house, and behind the scenes, it's the best day we could ever have. But to have that awareness to who we are and what we are, I think what you said there, Melissa, is so many of these stories are a shared experience, and too many times they're held in darkness. And if we can allow those to be exposed, that's been my if it's a mission, if it's an opportunity, it's whatever I can do to really allow others not to feel alone in this journey, because the evil will try to convince you that you are alone, that it is your shame and it will never be reconciled. And I'm here to tell you that's a lie. It's an opportunity to become better first inside, because it's counterintuitive. The pain's coming from someone else, so you want to react. And I did that for years. I'm right, you're wrong, I can show you why. And what I realized is, wait a minute, what if and I'm saying this with purpose, what if I am the problem a little bit? And once you start your question with, it's not me, but maybe it is, you can start to now let light into places that you maybe wanted to even keep quiet for yourself. And that is when I believe the letters get written.
That gets right to the heart of this podcast and the goal and the hope that we have so many external factors in our world that encourage us and tell us and preach to us and pressure us to stay out of what's uncomfortable, stay comfortable. Don't go into the other stuff. If you have difficult relationships, cut them off, get them out of your life. But in the heart of this book, and I think in the heart of true lived experience, that living into that uncomfortable space and going through those uncomfortable waters, that's where the real growth, the real and I don't want to say the word magic, but the real possibilities and opportunities lie, that when we're not afraid, or maybe even when we are afraid, that we lean into that. Oh my goodness.
You,
So many more things become possible.
you just gave me goosebumps again. I had a conversation, a reader went through a friend, called me, and got my phone, and phone's in the book, everything's in the book. Anybody wants to call, I highly encourage it, because I love anything I can do. But I got on the phone today, and they were talking about this concept of time will heal all wounds. And I said, the problem with that is, it's a great statement, it eases everything, but the heart isn't a clock. The heart does not have a clock in it. It's the only organ in our human body that isn't controlled by the brain. And if you start to think about that, and you think about how the heart needs to find its way, and it will continue to hold on to things if we don't go into the heart and release it. And that's a very, very difficult, and anybody, and I say this early in the book, anybody is going to tell you that this is easy. This is not a book that says if you just follow these 3 steps, you'll be back to a great relationship. It's not true, and we have to be okay with that. And because perfect is a lie. That's the other thing about this, whether you're living any life, is we're always held to a standard self first of saying, oh, we got to be perfect. And no, you got to be a better version. And once you become just a better version day in and day out, and believe me, days I'm waking up going, God, please, yesterday I don't think I was. How can I become? And if you can just be open to the possibilities, I believe this book and others who have similar sentiment will open that possibility to allow, as I say this a lot, to allow the prayer to find its intended destination. Because if we can go first to self and say, what if? And if what if is uncomfortable, that's okay. Just be okay with that. It's okay. You know what? I didn't do it right then. Maybe with a little bit of perspective here and diligence here, I can find a better tomorrow than I am today. And that, in the end, is the mission. And that's what, to me, makes this podcast so special. And is such a purposeful solution, because everybody is telling us, delete them, excise them, detoxify. And it's only in the friction that you find an edge, a sharpening. And it's only in that process that when you're honest, you can say, as I did it for years and continue to say, whoa, it's easy to step back into that behavior, but it's more powerful and long-term if you step out of it.
Well, and you leaned into the most difficult journey of all. You leaned into the story that you may have been wrong.
And Melissa, it's so hard because those around you, and I mean close, it's hard to let go of hurt. It's hard. I didn't want to, but the more I prayed about it and thought about it and became about it, the hard part is those around you have a status quo of negativity as well. They have heard the negative story. They want to continue it. They want to perpetuate it. That's their status quo. And so it's really one to where it's it's you, yes, but it's also your inner circle also has to come to grips with, it's okay. We don't have to carry the balance sheet that says they did more wrong to you. And so I say this, it's not estrangement's like a horrible balance sheet that'll never balance, because we're always in constant sort of comparing. Your hurt was greater than mine, or my hurt was greater than yours, and we never reconcile. It's always the tax of this, and it's always taxed higher and higher, to where it's a circle that you can't get out of unless you stop it. And that's the hard place. And people ask all the time, yeah, but it's you had it easy. Or no, I still carry around every relationship I have as if it's a soap bubble. And I want to be careful with it, but I never want that soap bubble to be considered perfect. It's because it never will be, but it's ours. And if that relationship is one day you see someone, it's so much different than zero. And can you build on that? And is it okay just to have a phone call? Is it okay just to have a letter of awareness? And so I love it when the readers send me a note. I haven't talked to my sister in 2 years. I just talked to her. I'm so tired of apologies over grave sites.
That is profound. Yes. And Dave, when you leaned into that possibility that you may have been wrong, whether you were or whether you're not, when you leaned into that, it changed that perspective a little bit from keeping score on that tally sheet to getting your perspective to what you want, as opposed to how well you're doing or whether you were right. And I'm
sorry. It's such I'm thinking about, because there's so many times I want to react and say, I'm right, I'm not wrong, I'm right. That did not happen. That is a lie. That did not. And I want to course correct the narrative. And there's a letter I write to William where I'm getting in a plane in the morning and I'm walking down the aisle of the plane and an individual stands up and says, "There goes Dave Koll, the homewrecker." I mean, not just saying it under his breath. He's screaming it on a Southwest Airlines flight. And I'm walking down the aisle. And my peers in the meeting we're flying to are with me in the aisle. And it's one of those life realities where I'm walking and I remember processing it saying, what? Is he using my name? Who is this guy? And why is he screaming at somebody? He's screaming at me. And I end up turning and realizing, quickly who it was, what he was saying, and I could feel my soul wanting to defend. And at that moment, it was, hey, have a nice day. Turned around, went back and sat down. And the first thing that came to my mind was, how do you blame an echo? As much as I wanted to defend my honor and my pride and embarrassment in front of my peers, something came to me in my soul that said, how do you blame an echo? And how many of us are carrying around stories that are just echoes of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 that have been carried through the chain? And why wouldn't he scream if he thought that's what happened? If he thought that's what he was told? But these narratives get out of control and they get life. And the lie needs to be retold. It just keeps going and going. It'll just it'll stay alive all the way. But the truth has to chase it. And how we deal with that, and that was where, to me, as difficult as it is, as hard as it is in these situations for all of us, if we can just pause and say, what if? What if what he heard, he believes is true? He's protecting his friend. He's protecting his best friend. And in a situation, I obviously I would hope he wouldn't do it again to anybody, but it allowed me to further drive self-awareness and also find opportunity to deepen my own processing of this pain.
Let's talk about the dreams.
Oh.
The wonderful gift of the dreams.
Now, I have said for years that it's not witchcraft. I believe it. That there's two. I think there's 2 types of dreams. There's the dream of your mind that just has an escape, right? Your brain just takes a vacation and allows anything to fall in. And I also believe that the dreams are used, and you can go into the Bible, you can go find this, But dreams are used by the Holy Spirit and others to communicate and to share and to encourage. And during this process, I would have dreams of meeting my grandson. I would have dreams where I would literally hold him, and I could physically in my dreams feel him. And I would wake up emotional and so appreciative that the Holy Spirit allowed that moment. That when I would be at my darkest moment, there would be a dream, and it would come in, and it would be my grandson. And one of my favorites, I'll never forget, he would come to me. He came to me, and I raised him up, and I held him, and he said, "Grandpa Champ," and he said my name, and I said, "Oh my gosh, William, thank God you know who I am," and we went through this. But I truly believe dreams can be used to allow you to see, to feel. So I'm a big believer in an intent and feeling and allowing dreams to come in and to be present in a way that it's a pretty precious gift to me. And those were moments in this journey to where I needed them, and they came. And so it was really, really important.
Things got pretty dark for you. You write it with, again, honest vulnerability of how dark and hopeless things were. And I'm not sure what I want to do, but I guess I want to thank you again for your vulnerability and for your honesty. It gave me another entry point into other situations and experiences and difficulties in my life when I have felt hopelessness, and your honest expression of that, and, finding rays of hope to cling to in the midst of that was really powerful.
Thank you. It's just as you are saying that, I can feel my emotion come in, right? And I can feel those moments. And hope, I write to William in a couple letters about hope, and I tell him, don't ever let someone sell you hope, because that's what God gave you innately. It's in your heart. That's what propels us one day to the next. It's hope. And it's when you see that those sun's rays come up or go down, or when you feel that warmth or see something of just amazing beauty, that's hope. You see hope. You can feel it. But that doesn't negate the constancy of that battle, because evil will want you to feel that you're hopeless. It will want to tell you you don't have enough in the tank. Give up. And I'm no different. I'm not some monk. I would wake up just truly saying, what am I doing? What is this ever going to find itself? And it was so difficult on days that when you wake up and everything's telling you to give up, and your friends, and all in their best moments, oh, don't pay attention to her. She's this, and she's better off. You're better off without her. No, I'm not. Your heart knows the truth. And so everything is there, and I wanted to capture that, because I knew if I wrote these letters to William, or if anyone was going to read those, they had to be an authentic description as best I could, because I know that others are in that same place, and I never wanted it to be read to where, that was nothing. No, it is so hard and so sometimes difficult. And the more I told myself and felt the prayers of others, or felt those moments, the more I realized I'm not alone. I'm not. And your faith, your opportunity, your spirit is sitting there saying to you, don't give up. Don't allow this. And today's a hard day. Tomorrow's a new one. Work through it and find that better version and I think mastery in this life is just in that everyday realization that you have what you need. It's not more. It's you have what you need. And even though I cried myself to sleep and begged God for this to reconcile, I knew the prayer would find itself. I knew it would come in. I knew it would find me first. And if I knew I could heal me, then it became a possibility to heal others. And therein lies the truth. And that opportunity is so real. And anyone listening, I think we do disservice to people in these moments of desperation. Because I say estrangement is a poison you drink every day. You drink it every day. And others around you don't see the side effects of it all the time. They think you're just doing what you do and rolling, but you've got to figure out a way to keep those side effects from becoming visible. And what I realized was the only antidote, the only thing that I could take to solve it was prayer. And the more I prayed, the more the virus dissipated. And I could feel myself when I wasn't prayerful. And I am not you want to say God does the most with the least? He is doing it with me every day. They are laughing in heaven going, this moron? This is who you chose? But the more I found myself in those depths, the more I listened and heard. And it's not witchcraft. It's just allowing your soul, whether it's God or any spiritual solution you want, allow it to find residence in your heart. And then pay the mortgage for that to live there. Be open to it. Be available for it. And okay, today wasn't a good one. Help me out tomorrow here. And that path becomes illuminated. And that's what I want from anyone who reads the book is this path can be illuminated. It can be illuminated. And you can find your story. You can find self, not in perfection, but just in the ordinary. And once ordinary is achieved, you've got it.
What happened on April 19th?
Oh, Melissa, on April 19th, a prayer found its intended destination. At its most darkest, and this was one of the things about the letters. When the publisher asked about the letters, I said there's only one ask about the letters is we will never change them. We can cut pieces out, but we can't change them. And they were very initially, and I said, if this is gonna work, it's got to be real. And so we ended up moving a lot of letters around to try to, make sense, and the readers will see that. So there's no timeline associated, but the letter right before April 19th is the letter I wrote, and I was at my darkest time. I thought the overburden of all of this was going to suffocate me. I was trying to breathe the day before. And I knew that I had to breathe. And I knew that I had to just hold on. And I'm driving in the car and I get a text from my ex-wife that said, if you want to see William, he's at this address right now. Now, my son, William, is also named William, and we explain that in the book. But he's a long list of Williams, and I had just had dinner with William, which we call Red Dog, is his nickname, the night before. And I texted back, do you mean William Clifford, our son? And she said, no. And now I don't have my reading glasses on. I can't see a thing without them. And I'm driving and I'm trying to figure it out, Melissa. And I'm like, and I could feel my heart just pounding, pounding. And the other thing about April 19th, it was Good Friday. And as I am driving in that car, I had to pull over to the turn lane because I couldn't control what my heart was saying to me. And my system was getting ahead of my ability to process it. And so I texted back, is Caitlin okay with this? Are you sure? And she said yes and yes. And I drove to the address. And I don't know how I turned the car. I don't know how I moved the vehicle to propel it forward, but I pulled into the driveway and I immediately thought I was at the wrong driveway. And the house was dark. The doors were shut. There were no cars in the driveway. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she gave me a wrong address on purpose. And this was just a bad deal. And I thought, no, this can't be it. And I looked at the address again. It was the right. I got out of the car and I started walking towards the door, and the door opened up and there was my middle daughter, Allison, and she was waving me to come in. And now's when I know this is going to happen. Every prayer, there were thousands of, not just mine, but so many others. I could feel them landing. Each step I took, they made my muscles move. And as I opened the door, I walked in and it was a long hallway and there was no one in the hallway. All I could hear was, it was like a pet store. There were dogs barking and all this commotion. And I thought, my goodness, what kind of house is this? Where are all these, and where's grandma? Where's grandpa? Where is this child? And out of nowhere came around the corner my ex-wife carrying the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. There he was in physical presence, my grandson. 2.5 years after he started his first breath, he is now breathing in front of me. And I remember processing this and trying to in real time, and I happened to get some form of video going on my camera because I thought I was going to be able to take a quick picture. And I handed it to my daughter, Alice, and I said, can you capture this? And at that moment, my ex-wife was handing me my grandson. And to feel his physical presence when for so many days and weeks and years, I could only write about it or feel him spiritually was overwhelming. Was overwhelming. And I could feel myself losing sort of my control, and I was crying, and I could feel him become unsure, and then he reached back for grandma, and I gave him back to her, and he turned over his shoulder to look at me again, and I could feel him studying me. I could feel him looking at me. And my ex-wife, did a perfect thing because she took him and sat him down in the living room on the floor, and she went and got a black car and a red car that he loved to play with. And he sat there and he looked at me, and I went over and I sat with him on the floor. And Melissa, he started showing me how the cars work. And what in my mind, he wasn't saying, Grandpa, where have you been? Grandpa, why have you abandoned me? Grandpa, why is this? Grandpa, what normal adults would have said is, how come, how come? He didn't care. All he wanted was to get me up to speed and say, Grandpa, these are my 2 favorite cars. Let's play with them. And we played with them. And then he got up and he walked over to the credenza and he brought a book about firemen back. And he sat in my lap. And I read the page on the book, and he would look at me and study my face. And I could feel him say to me, so you're Grandpa Champ. I've been waiting. I've known you. And the more we went through this book, the more those looks and those feelings. And it finally became time to go. And I stood up and I held him up in front of me. And he just stared at me, looking at me and processing. And here's this little 2.5-year-old gorgeous soul. And my ex said, he is really studying. And what he was telling me was everything I wanted to feel and hear was he knew. He knew we were one. He knew we were together. And that it's okay. And that no matter what, from this moment on, we can't be apart. We're together. There may be distance, there may be this, but we have felt our physical presence connect. And it is a remarkable, transformative, amazing feeling to believe you won't, but pray that you can. And then at the end of that, realize from this point on, it's okay. It's okay. And no matter how and what becomes, it's okay. And that was my April 19th.
Do you think he had the same dreams?
There's probably going to be a few people that go, okay, Dave. I know he did. And I found this back, and it kept hitting me as, in the Bible, so many parables, so many stories about a childlike faith. And I am convinced that when you're born, you have and know the secret of heaven. You know the secret. You were just there. But through the attrition of becoming human and man, we nullify that awareness. And I think that's why Jesus said, have the faith of a child, or don't ever hurt the faith of a child. And that, to me, is what was so precious, and always is with this crazy kid, is he knows. And he's been telling me and influencing me to, it's okay, Grandpa. It's okay, Grandpa Champ. You're going to be fine. And he's been there all the way through this. And I just had another dream. We're in New Orleans now, where we live, and he's up in Omaha. And I just had another dream about him 2 nights ago, where he came to me and we were fishing, and he was telling me this story, and I couldn't understand it in the dream of, why are you telling me this story? And I woke up and I'm like, all right, we got to figure this out, because he's coming to me again and he wants something from me and he wants to tell me something. And so I know he knows. And that's the preciousness of the relationship. It's the preciousness of no matter what. And it's the opportunity that I think this story, these letters, I pray, will find residence in hearts, that not just for those that are hurting, but also for those that have hurt. Because we are all hurting in this process, and the only one winning is evil. It's okay. It's okay to say, wait a minute, we got to stop this. My grandpa used to always tell me, Dave, the only hole that could ever be filled on this earth that's been dug by man is with God. And if you're going to fill it back up with pain, it'll never balance. But if you can fill it back up with forgiveness or just an opportunity, you'll find that it's not so heavy. There's still bad days. Don't ever let anybody tell you there's not, because that's what we have to deal with. But once you figure it out that, okay, what's the lesson of the blessing here, right? What am I trying to get? And if I can hear that and feel that, then I can be relevant and present for it. And there's so many prayers that are waiting to land. And that's what I say at the end of the book. I write from William's perspective back to me a letter at the end. And I say, why, Grandpa, why? Why did this happen? Why were we allowed to meet? And I said, I don't have an answer. But I think the simplest answer is the real one. The door that was typically locked in someone's heart for some reason was left unlocked that day. And a prayer found its way in. And if we open ourselves up to that possibility, then It's okay. Still hurts, but it's okay.
That's beautiful. Do you still have a
We
relationship
do,
with him
and I
today?
always like, that crazy kid. I know this ain't gonna matter much for the video, but he,
All right, folks, jump over to YouTube to see this
yeah,
picture. That is beautiful.
you can't print that
Beautiful.
smile. But and this is the same thing. I talk about this with at the final part of the letters and some of the challenges I have in the book. And as you read, I tried to step out of the letters to input little champs challenges for the reader to attempt to
Yes.
even further make
Yes.
some compelling or relevant arguments or statements. And we, the relationship with my oldest daughter is, people would say, "Oh my gosh, it's broken. Why aren't you seeing her more? Why aren't you talking more? Why is she so angry about this? Or why is she so happy?" We have to be true to the possibility that this may be the relationship. And it's okay. And I think about my oldest daughter all the way to our youngest daughter, who's a junior in college. They are so different. And the relationships are different. And the proximity and the continuation of things that are different. And we have to be okay with it. They can't be the same across. And Caitlin and I are still, there are days, there are bad days. This book process was very difficult for Kate and very, very unsettling. And she has all the right reason to say, "Dad, why? How come? Don't." And I have to be okay with, Kate, it's being pulled, honey, and this is not about me. This is about what could come out of this for others. And she's still processing, and it's okay. And it's not easy. Because I go back to the rule. What if? Of course she's hurting. Of course she sees this. She doesn't want to be ostracized. She doesn't want to be vilified. I get all that. But
I didn't read it that she was a villain ever or vilified. I read it as there are a lot of people hurting in this story. The only real person I felt was vilified was you toward yourself. And I don't know that it was vilifying. I think
Melissa,
it was
when
being
I wrote this, when the letter started to become a possibility for publication, if this was going to be, "I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to prove it to all my 14 friends," then it would be horrific. And what I wanted this ultimate to be is almost a sort of public apology and an awareness of self to say, "Man, your mom and dad were some really bad husband and wives, but they were very, very pretty dang good mom and dads. And in that, it made some very, very difficult realities. And there's so many of these relationships and marriages out there that could hopefully, if they're in the middle of it, stop hurting each other. The kids are there." It's such a hard reality for me to own. Is we thought we could keep our weapons and guns pointed at each other, metaphorically, and not have that impact the relationship of our children. And that's where the reality of vilifying is, you know what? Let's just be accountable for it. Let's own it. And we still have, there's always going to be trolls. We got trolls out there on the internet. "Oh, you did this, you did that." No, I know what we did. I know how we did it. And please read the book and realize that I know why Caitlin's hurt. I know why she's hurting. And I know why they are hurting. And I know how possible it is to find forgiveness.
David, one last thing before we jump off here. You listed the address in the book that the house number that you were driving to on that April 19th. It was 7911. Do you know what that said to me when I read those numbers? Heaven help. 7911.
Okay.
Heaven help.
Wow.
All right. I'm sorry we're out of time. Dave, I thank you so much for your story, for your vulnerability. This book, it's called Letters to William, The Journey of Healing Through the Pain of Estrangement. The link to buy this book is in the show notes. Make sure you click on it. Make sure you buy several copies. Share them with all of your friends. Dave, it's been a blessing. Thank you so much.
Who have taken the time to listen, and a prayer will find its intended destination.